Hi everybody, Don Andrews. I'm here with Chief Joe this week up here in Boone, North Carolina. We've been painting all day and we're stopping just to talk to you a little bit. I wanted to talk to you about making believable flesh tones in our figure paintings and also in the figures that we introduce into our landscape paintings. I want to stop just a minute before I start, I guess, and tell you a little bit about the tools I use. I use very common watercolor supplies. I get them all from here, from Chief Joe, of course. I've been using the Arches 140-pound cold press for almost 40 years. If you've been painting a long time, back in those days, Arches was the paper. And nowadays, there are many excellent papers on the market, 140, 300 pound. I guess every time I try another paper, my whole life I've used Arches, and so when I try another paper, it's not Arches, and it reacts a little bit differently. That doesn't mean better or worse, but it throws me a little bit, so I always seem to go back to Arches 140 cold press. I use Robert Simmons brushes. They're wonderful synthetic sable brushes. They call them white sable brushes. Again, Joe has a wonderful variety here in the store, and when he's not looking, I sneak in there and grab one or two. I've used the American Journeys paint since it really came out, and that's been all of a sudden, I guess, 15 years ago, or at least 10. I don't really think that American Journey is superior to the other professional brands, but I've tested them out and I feel they're comparable to any other brand of paint. I use them because there's good variety in the colors, and I love these large tubes. We need to use paint more freely. That's a common problem that we all face, is we get a little stingy with the paint. It makes our paintings light and delicate. I like to use rich paint, and I love these big tubes because I'm not so scared to have the big squeeze. And I might add, they're wonderful value. It's a good, reasonable price for these products. So basically, that's what I use. I have the Chief Joe's easel that I've used for many years, a French easel, and it's also quite a bargain and holds up very well. I recommend it highly. So those are my materials. A water bucket, I guess, and some paper towels, and we're ready to go. I'm going to give you a formula for flesh, how to mix believable flesh tones. Very easy. You'll be able to capture it right away. But the flesh that I'm going to show you in the formula, the problem with it is that it is a formula and it creates very warm flesh. It describes flesh accurately, but it's not living flesh. So after I give you the formula for flesh, I'm going to show you how to make flesh come alive. So the end of the demonstration is probably the most important part. I just used a few colors, and again, these are all American Journey. This is Naples yellow, and it's a very dense pigment. I use any of the cool reds. I have 3 on my palette. That's wild fuchsia, rose madder, alizarin crimson, and then a couple of earth tones. This is raw sienna, and Joe also has harvest wheat, which is the quinacridone equivalent, and it also, you can switch them out if you prefer that. And then for darker skin, we'll add sepia to that. I might add here that I do not add burnt sienna into the mixture because burnt sienna has more red in it and it tends to make the flesh tone a little too hot. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is get a generous amount of Naples yellow out into my mixing well. I might, before I start, say, you know, I always hear people complaining about Naples yellow. They say it's opaque, it's dense. Doesn't let any light through. It's chalky. And I'm going to put a little bit up on my page here, and I'm putting it up reasonably thick. And doggone it, they're right. That's opaque. It's chalky. No light's getting through it. It doesn't say so on the side of the tube. but you are allowed to add water to this color. And so what is Naples yellow opaque? Well, it can be, but with the addition of water, it becomes wonderfully, wonderfully transparent. So I don't really worry about the opacity or transparency of a certain color because it's so easily adjusted with the addition of water. So we're coming in and adding a little water to this mixture of Naples yellow, and then I'm just going to reach into wild fuchsia and just touch into that a little bit, and what you get is a very delicate or high-key flesh tone, like you would see in someone who's not been out in the sun a lot, or in a child or a baby. A very enjoyable light flesh tone. Just those two colors. So that's a pretty easy mixture. And if you'll notice, we're going to make all of the flesh that we make right out of the same mixture. All I'm doing now is I'm going to add a little bit more wild fuchsia, a little denser amount of Naples yellow, and I might add that it is mostly Naples yellow here, and that didn't change. I need to get a little bit more, and that will give us a little bit of a pinkish kind of a flesh tone. Again, high key and very usable for light-skinned flesh. Now, all I'm doing now is, down here in the south, and most people, by the end of the summer, we've got a little bit of tan, so right into this very same mixture, I'm just adding a little raw sienna. And that will give us a flesh tone that has just a little ruddier complexion. So not much of a change. All of those are very enjoyable and very usable flesh. Now we're going to go to Mexico, the Latinos. Their complexion is just a bit darker, and so I'm switching from rose madder into a switch from the wild fuchsia, and a little bit more generous amount of raw sienna will give a bit ruddier complexion still. All of those very usable and very agreeable flesh tones. Now we're going to go a little darker, people of color. So all we're doing now is I'm reaching into just a touch of alizarin crimson. That might have been a little bit much, but that's okay. We'll add I'm adding Naples, by the way, to even the darker flesh tones. It seems to give the flesh a little more vitality. Now here, instead of going from raw sienna to burnt sienna, I'm jumping over burnt sienna and going down to sepia. Sepia is a very dark brown, and I'm just adding a little bit of that into the mixture, and we get a little bit ruddier, darker complexion still. And now all I'm doing is increasing the amount of sepia into the mixture for darker people, just a little bit more, and it drops it down the value scale. I need a little bit more to the next darker flesh. And with the addition of a little more sepia into the mixture, then it drops down a little darker still. And then one more time, the addition of sepia into the mixture will give us a dark, rich, very dark flesh tone. So with those few colors, we have a wonderful variety of flesh. Now here's what the problem is. Let me clean up just a little bit. The problem is that when we paint flesh, either in a portrait or a figure in a landscape, we're telling the viewer a believable flesh tone here, but the flesh isn't enjoyable. It's not alive. It records accurately what flesh is, but we want flesh to be lively. So I'm coming in and mixing, starting over, and I'm mixing a generous amount of a nice light flesh, and I'm putting that brush aside, picking up another brush. I'm cleaning my palette off just a little bit. And I'm going to start with the opposite colors from warm flesh tone, which will be the cooler colors. Usually I use the lighter blues. This is a American Journey Andrews Turquoise. I seem to be partial to that one for obvious reasons. This is Manganese blue, a very transparent, wonderful blue. It works beautifully here. And then this is American Journey's Cerulean blue, also a very nice color. I occasionally will use cobalt blue, but I find that I'd stay away from the darker blues. I'm using the lighter blues almost exclusively. I also make a violet for you, and we'll use that. I'll use greens, and but not just any green, not hooker's green. I'm using the lighter greens because we're going to be pumping the flesh tone into those colors. And it's much easier for the flesh tone to dominate or overcome these colors if they're lighter. So I'm using these colors. This is Andrews Turquoise. And we can go ahead, I guess, and paint all of this in turquoise in the beginning. And now it's very important, I come in and make sure this is good and wet. So I'm coming in and getting that nice and wet, doing a little changing there. And I'm putting that brush down and reaching in with another brush into my flesh, and this is what I call pushing. I'm pushing that cool color to the side a little bit and letting this, because it's wet, it blends. Now that's beginning to blend very nicely. Notice that it neutralizes a little bit as it comes down. What we're looking for is a nice clean flesh tone. So this is what I call pushing. I'll come in and hit it a second time, touch it around a time or two. Here again, it's warm, but not quite as fresh as I would like. So I come in and push that underneath color out of the way. Notice that I'm saving a little bit of that cool color to complement this. And then I would probably wait for this to dry a bit, but then we come in and we tell the story of fabrics or clothing and that kind of thing. And it makes flesh that feels much more like believable flesh. That was a little wetter. Don't worry about things like that. It's running down into the face a little too much. Happens all the time. I'll just pick it up and push this flesh back in there. So that begins to be a little bit of a fresher statement in there. So that tells the story of living flesh much more so than just the all warm flesh tone. Let's do another one or two. We'll try spring green. Spring green is such a wonderful color. Again, American Journey color. I love this color, and but it's very powerful. And so we just need a little bit of it. I'm going to come in and we'll start off with spring green. By the way, if you are having trouble getting the flesh to granulate through and be clean here, just do the upper torso and let that be enough. And while this is nice and wet, and I'll come in and make sure it's nice and wet, I'll switch over and push the flesh tone into that. While it's nice and wet, just let it blend. Come on and blend. And again, I'm pushing that underneath color to the side. So we get some variety in the flesh. It's not just all warm paint. And I touch it in several places, but again, I'm leaving a generous amount of that underneath color. And then, once that's done, we'll come in with the spring green. And then back with the flesh. And this, now there's a good example. That the pigment was a little dense there. Happens all the time, don't worry about that. It's a little murky, so I'm coming in and pushing this aside. And as we push that underneath color aside, it begins to brighten up a little bit. So this fellow's walking on the side of a hill or something like that. And here again, we'll just give him a little bit of a bathing suit. This is a PG rated demo. Maybe a little hat. I wouldn't wear that bathing suit. I wouldn't wear that hat, but anyway, very pleasing, believable flesh tones. Let's try one more. We'll go in and let's, this time, instead of just using one arbitrary color as a complement, we'll use 2 or 3. And that will, again, give us good variety. We'll start off with manganese blue this time. And the American Journey Manganese Blue is one of my favorites. It's so beautiful and extremely transparent. It's a great one to start with for these figure demonstrations. We'll start with this and we'll come in here. And I get it pretty wet, so I'm going to go ahead and bring this on down, and we're going to have other arbitrary colors into this. Make sure it's nice and wet, that's key. Into that we'll put, let's make a violet. I make beautiful violets with fuchsia. We're putting that in with a little cerulean blue, and we'll touch into that. The only thing, I water it down a bit. I don't want it to be too dark, and that's fine. We'll just stick that in around, and we'll come in with, we'll mix a little bit of this spring green in here. I don't know if that's wise, but we're going to do it anyway. That's okay. And we're playing around with this. Don't be in a hurry. I've got it good and wet now, so see, it's going to really blend. It's really very transparent and blends very nicely. That's what you're looking for, is that kind of blending, so that now we'll come in with our flesh, light flesh, and just touch into that, making sure that we're saving generous amounts of that underneath wash, and it's doing all the work for us. And we'll come down here, put a little in the lower body, and then we'll add a little bit in the, we'll give a hint of a bathing suit. That's going to run down a little bit too much, but that's okay. And we'll just come in and sneak in a little hint of hair. And that begins to be a very nice, very believable, lively, pleasing flesh tone. That is much more enjoyable, again, than our reporting the truth of flesh without making flesh come alive. I hope this helps you out.